Hello, and welcome back to Specimen, the Sociologist. This is your host, Jessamyn Reichmann. Now, if you couldn't tell from the title of the podcast, I have a very corny way of introducing myself, and that is Jessamyn rhymes with specimen, but with a J, and I am a budding sociologist. Now, today's episode is going to look a wee bit different, as it is a voice memo segment. These episodes were born out of a silly habit that I have in my personal life, and that is by sending very lengthy, very long voice memos to my friends. Now, they may be filled with life changing personal advice, or perhaps, which oftentimes they're filled with this, a whole lot of sweet nothing. And I thought it would be a fun opportunity to bring that habit right on over here to this podcast. Now, these episodes may serve as follow ups to previous recordings, or again, they may just be spontaneous in nature and have nothing to do with sociology. With that being said, let's dive into today's first voice memo. Do as I say, not as I did. About 2 episodes ago, I discussed the sociology behind friendships and provided relational advice on how to approach the concept of friendship from a sustainable place. And I wish the advice that I gave came from a self help book or from my parents' wise teachings. However, a good chunk came from failure to recognize unhealthy habits on my end. And that's why today's episode is called Do As I Say, Not As I Did. For my first unsolicited advice, less is more when it comes to friendships. There's this false belief that the more friends you have equates to a more vibrant social life, and that statement could not be further from the truth. I found that less is more when it comes to dishing out the friendship title, and this is why. When you enter into a friendship, you're committing your time to learn more about this person, and that is a huge privilege to embrace. You'll begin to learn about the wildest dreams and their biggest insecurities, as well as gain the confidence of this individual. And while, yes, this is a beautiful aspect of life, too much of anything can be unhealthy. In my case, it showed up as a lack of depth in relationships, struggling to maintain meaningful connections, and stress from trying to keep up with numerous social obligations, and oftentimes ending my day emotionally drained because I spread my energy way too thin across a large group of people that I called my friends. Now, if I can flip the same side of that coin over, this habit of overextending myself came across as inconsistency to others, and in actuality, it was just true social exhaustion. So again, do as I say, not as I did. Which, side note, I'm kind of getting over a cold, so if I sound a little bit nasally, that is the reason why. Going to advice number 2. Make sure to take up space in your friendship. And when I say that phrase, it can mean anything from openly communicating your needs, expressing what works for you versus what doesn't work for you, and overall contributing to the intimacy that you are co-creating. Now, I was raised in an environment where it was Jessamyn, always be accommodating, value the needs and requests of other people over the needs of yourself, always be agreeable, avoid conflict, even if that does mean you're going to take on extra burdens or even compromise your own boundaries. And while I believe there are moments in life that you should be accommodating towards other people, if that's the only way that you're operating in a relationship, darling, that is unsustainable. And especially when that person that you're in a relationship with doesn't have that same approach to prioritizing your needs. And so I found that it is healthy to take up space in your relationship. And when you begin to proactively build the principles of engagement, you are creating the blueprint for how the other person can show up. So, yeah, that's what I say. Take up space in your relationships. And again, do as I say, not as I did. Advice number 3, be aware of the assholes. And yes, you heard me, ASKHOLES. Now, these assholes are people who honestly operate like an empty hole. They're always asking for something and oftentimes don't have anything to offer in return. These people leverage the friendship title in your life, but again, only seek out your company for their personal needs. And you gotta kind of be careful with these people because they are sneaky. They may only call in a crisis or to emotionally vent or just to kick it. And while these gestures aren't inherently bad or uncommon in friendships, if they are the only foundation for you guys to come together, you may want to check your position in that person's life and see if there is any opportunity to grow together in the future. And let me give you a cheeky example. I would always consider myself to be a very generous person. And this actually goes all the way back to childhood. Um, for my friends who live outside of the States, there's this thing called the Scholastic Book Fair, which is a school event that features books for students to buy. And it's meant to celebrate reading and literacy. Now, for the span of 2 weeks, the book fair completely takes over your library. And there's just so much stuff to buy from bookmarks to fuzzy pens and stationery and like huge maps. And so I remember at the youthful age of 7, there were some kids who couldn't participate in the book fair because they didn't have the finances. So I turned into the little black Robin Hood and started stealing stuff from the book fair. I'd run out to the schoolyard and give it away to all these kids who couldn't afford it. And I'm not gonna lie, I actually had a really good run. The fair went on for 2 weeks. I think I made it the first week and halfway through the second week before the librarian was like, Jessamyn, your pockets are kind of full. But anyways, it actually was two people who snitched. It was I think the librarian who caught me. And then there was another kid who told the librarian to keep an eye out for me. And I'm like, bro, I definitely took something for you. And if you want the system to work, we got to have a tight lip policy. Anywho, all that to say is I have always been a generous person, and I found that over time there are people who become entitled to that generosity, whether it's always expecting me to put everything down last second to help them, or to always be cheerful, or to always give, or to always ask about their day. And in those relationships that solely relied on my generosity, when I actually made the decision to step back from always serving their needs, I realized that, oh, darn, I compensated for the lack of genuine connection by focusing on your needs. And there's actually no relationship really here. And so, again, do as I say, not as I did. Now, diving into point number four, diving into point number four, don't lose yourself in a friendship. I spoke about this topic on my podcast called Social Inebriation and how individuals can operate with the herd mentality and conform to the behavior of those around them as a means to belong with the masses. Now, there have been personal moments in my life that I have adopted the mindset of my friends, and in the process, I lost core values of my personality. Whether it was my quirkiness or my kindness, there were just certain relationships that kind of sucked that positivity out of my existence. And it wasn't until I removed myself completely that I was able to have a clear perspective on my behavior in those environments. So if you ever feel like you're not yourself or that you kind of lost the simple things that used to give you pleasure, take time to step back and recalibrate. There have been friendships that I've asked if we could take a 2-month break from chit chatting, or there have been moments where a couple of years ago, I temporarily deactivated my Instagram account for a year, and it was just so beautiful to focus on the relationships that were in front of me and to be as present as possible. And if you do decide to embark on a period of just kind of a relational reset, don't be afraid that you won't find another friendship or that you'll fall into the perpetual trap of loneliness, because I'll tell you two things. If you know yourself, you're never lonely. And two, there's nothing worse than being alone in a relationship. So again, do as I say, not as I did. But on that note, let me take a quick little coffee break. If you know me, I love drinking black coffee. I don't know what it is. I'm not a bitter person, but I just love the taste of black coffee. Anyway, let's go into point number 5. Slow down when getting to know a person. When it comes to building a relationship, my greatest recommendation is to wait and see them in all 4 seasons. Now, I'm not talking about the weather, rather, the seasons of life. And that can include failure, success, grief, and growth, and whatever season you want to throw in there. Because it's in the slow roast process that intimacy is born. Because you'll never know everything about a person, and that's kind of the point. It keeps you curious, and you should always be seeking to understand more about them. And a fun little way that I do this is by asking my friends, hey, how are you emotionally? How are you spiritually? How are you socially? And then I typically follow up that question with the big question, which is, how can I support you in this season of life? Now, I will be honest, I do have a tendency of making assumptions about people. And hello, yes, I'm a sociologist. I study people's behavior for a living. But I just have personally found that it's better to remain curious and to ask questions and to know that even from the last point that you spoke to someone, so much life can happen in a day that it's always best to ask rather than to assume. And therefore, you take the slow roast approach to building intimacy with another person. So again, do as I say, not as I did. On that note, let's slide into point number 6. You are not graced for every relationship. And y'all, growing up, I was taught to love every person. Now, as I've matured over the years, I've learned that love is a verb. And furthermore, it's a tool for transformation. That it's the way in which you love someone that allows them to become a better version of themselves. And I found that in my lived experience that I provide a very distinct form of love based off of my life, my work, and it's really cool to leverage that experience to provide support to other people. However, I've learned that not all help is helpful, and that there are some people that I have a conversation with that our words simply just don't resonate with them. And guess what? That's a-okay because it doesn't make me any less valuable. And I realized that I can't be the Cinderella in everyone else's story. So again, use self-awareness and do as I say, not as I did. I was going to fish for another point, but I feel like 6 is sufficient. So hopefully these add a bit of perspective on how to navigate friendships and build a strong support system in the process. So until next time, have a powerful day.